for life engineering, processes that combine science, wisdom, and spirituality to build a life of alignment. Joining Dr. Pat is your host, Gabriela Embon, bringing you bi-weekly wisdom nuggets, your step-by-step guidance to build a life of no regrets. Stay tuned as they uncover powerful processes for you to realize your true potential. Are you ready for some magic wisdom? Life engineering starts now.
We have got a fabulous show. We're going to get right at it because this is one of these things that it just hangs around. And it's the miracle approach to perfectionism, and the fear of failure. This is one of the topics that Gabriela brings to us each and every episode, uplifting, inspiring, but also helping us deal with things that show up in everyday life. Gabriela, this is one of them, isn't it?
Absolutely. We actually had so much fun working with this in our last Theta Healing practice that I thought, let's share this with all our listeners. So yeah, that's how this episode was born.
Yeah.
I mean, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about this. As you said, it shows in every episode. We talked about how taking baby steps in launching the podcast with my husband was what helped me deal with the fear of failure. And by the way, if you haven't listened to that, we invite you to visit the previous episode, number 25. But today we want to look at this a little bit deeper. Previously, we have referred to failure as failure is not lack of success, but it's more avoidance. Failure is avoidance. So if it didn't work, doesn't mean I fail. It's more if I didn't dare, it means I fail.
Yeah.
But today I would like to propose a different angle to failure. And I invite you to play with me, to visualize with me, okay? So if you knew that to learn a task, I wouldn't even say master it, just to learn it and be able to do it, it would take you, let's say, 50 attempts. To have this skill, it would take you 50 tries. Would you, Dr. Pat, see, when you are in the 25, would you say you have failed 25 times?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think of it like that. Yeah, because the way that you positioned it, it reminds me of things that I've had to practice at and the skill sets. For example, you practice how to edit shows, let's say, or you practice how to do this. Right.
That's
and,
right.
It's a process where you learn. Now, what does that mean? That means that sometimes you do a really great job and other times you're not quite up to speed. But I haven't looked at it through the lens of failure. However, there have been other things in my life that I have looked through through the lens of failure.
Would you like to share?
Well, yes. And, part of that is when I go way, way back. And now that when you're in the moment of it, look, here, you and I are here today. We've learned a few things, but if you actually go back to those moments, I'll tell you what it is. When I lost my job after 24 and a half years, I got accepted to Columbia and I was encouraged to go to doctoral programs. And I applied to something like 35 programs, rejected by all of them except one. And that one, I was put on a wait list, but I felt so rejected, so dejected. I really did, that I couldn't even pay attention. I had moved to Seattle. So I thought at that moment, I have failed at this. That's the way I looked at it back then. And that feeling is so heavy.
So do you remember how many times you applied? How many attempts did
35.
you? 35.
35.
So you got accepted at the 35?
I applied to 35 and I was put on a waiting list for one school. Well, let's talk about it. It happened to be my number one choice. I was put on a waiting list for a year, ultimately got into that school. But the process of reading all those rejection letters, it's like, oh my God. And there aren't many times in my life where I felt like a failure, but this was one of them. And yeah.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
But if we were to, I can totally relate to that. If we were to look at this as I need to apply, if you knew in advance,
Yes.
before you started,
Yes.
beforehand, you knew that it will require from you to apply 35, 36 times before you get accepted. Then when you are in the 30, right, you wouldn't see that as I have failed 30 times or I've been rejected 30 times.
Yeah.
You would say, oh, I'm on my way. This is so much progress. I'm almost there. I have made, right, this amount of progress and I'm almost there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the way we have to look at these things, because it's not about an end game. It's really about the steps and journey we take. Had I not done that, had I not taken the path, had I not dialed the wrong phone number, had I not been lost and depressed at the time I did that, I wouldn't be here. And I think the one thing that you're talking about, can we see it as progress?
That's right. The invitation here is to say, okay, for the most part, we don't know how many attempts it will take us to master a skill, to get admitted to find a job, to get admitted to a school,
Yeah.
whatever the goal is. But if we knew in advance how many attempts it would require, then it would be very easy for us not to see, right, the lack of success along the path as a failure. We will see it, okay, I'm halfway there. I have made progress 50%, right? But because we don't know how long it's going to take us, we don't know how many attempts. Our expectation is, if I don't know, it should be immediately. It should be right now. And then every time it doesn't work, or we get a rejection letter, or the unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Starting the letter, then we see it as failure. But is it really failure, or is it just progress? So our ego will look at that as failure, because our ego expects to get results right away.
Yeah.
But our soul will look at this as progress. I have made, or it's like, look, this is like when you're driving. If you know it will take you an hour to arrive to your destination, when you are half hour into the road, you don't see that as failure. You go, how come I haven't gone there yet? No, I'm halfway through. I have made progress. But that is easy to do because we know how long it's going to take us and we have a map. Unfortunately, in life, we don't have that map and we don't know how long it's going to take us. And I guess there's a reason for that. It's for us to learn, to truly learn to embrace the journey, right? To truly, like you said, it's about the path. Embrace the journey, because it's where the growth happens. It's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
That progress that you talked about.
Mhm.
It's what allows us for a few things. One is to embody the end goal, right? As I am approaching that end goal, which I don't know how long it's going to take, I am embodying that end goal. Like as you are going through a pregnancy, you are embodying what it is to be a mother, especially if it's the first time, right? So that's number one. But also that progress allows us to learn, to clarify sometimes more, do I truly want to go there? Maybe I want to change my destination. Maybe that's not my end goal anymore. And also to course correct. It's like a video game. There are, challenges along the road that are not a stop sign, are for me, for the Pac-Man to eat that and become bigger and stronger, right? So there's so much magic in that progress, and that progress beyond everything, it's the remedy. It's the remedy when we focus on the programs, when we fall in love with the progress, even if we don't see it, we only see that it didn't work. When we look at the path and we make it the end goal, the path is the goal, then that's the remedy for perfectionism.
Yeah. And let's talk about perfectionism for a minute. Perfectionism is one of these man-made terms. And I say man by mankind is what I refer to. But we as people on the planet, we make things up. We make up constructs and ideas. And perfectionism is one that we made up. Time is another one we've made up. The meaning of time and the limitation of time, and not the abundance of time. So perfectionism is one of these things we've made up, and yet it sounds like it has now become our own prison.
Oh, I love how you describe our own prison. Absolutely. It's a coping mechanism of the mind, as we said. We definitely want to look deeper into when was that pattern of having to be perfect created. Does it come from my childhood? Did my parents expect me to be perfect? Sorry. So we want to look into that, but we can also change, as you said, the perception of perfectionism. I think that we want to be perfect because we think God is perfect if we look at a higher perspective. But if we go in that route, we'll realize that God didn't create a perfect world. Looking into the story of the creation in Genesis, it says it's good that God created every day something else, and it said it's good.
Yeah.
I actually counted how many times it says it's good in the first chapter of Genesis, and it appears, the word it's good appears 7 times. And the word perfection, you know how many times it appears? 0.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think this is a really important point, because yet we are holding ourselves to a standard that even the spiritual realm has not created for us. I mean, it is very clear. It doesn't matter who you follow. It doesn't matter what deity it is you follow. The perfectionism doesn't show up in them. As a matter of fact, when we read about the stories, and it doesn't matter whether you're looking at Baha'i or you're looking at Christianity or Catholicism or Buddhism, or whether it's part of the Islamic world, it doesn't matter. We don't hear stories of perfection. We hear stories of, I screwed up, let me show you how I fixed it. Right? Something like that.
Yeah. It's so powerful to realize that, like you said, it's a man creation, and it's understanding the difference between good versus perfect. Like you said, perfect is a need of the mind. It's our own creation. Good is divine energy. It's goodness, right? What a beautiful word, goodness. Just feel the energy of that word. It's the nature, it's divine energy, and it's the nature of goodness. That's what good is. Now, perfect is completely in need of our ego, of our mind. And basically, it also means there's nothing to change, not improve. If it's perfect, I can't add anything to it, right? It's a final product. So there's nothing to change. Of course, it's made by the mind. The mind doesn't like change, right? Now we start, okay, this actually makes sense. And it's boring, right? It's boring. So, but at the same time, right, the subconscious mind that is connected to your higher self, to your soul, says, okay, if it's perfect, then what's next? Now what? How do I continue growing and expanding from here? Because that's what your soul needs for you to grow and expand. So it's important to really understand the difference between the two of them, and realize that God didn't create a perfect world. And of course, we're part of the creation, so we're not perfect either. But the question is, how wonderful is it that God didn't create a perfect world?
There's so much pressure. There's so much pressure under it. And let's just talk about it from how we use it for a minute. And Emily is going to have to correct me here if I'm wrong. But for example, the University of Washington, apparently, their football team, their football season had a perfect record. And that perfect record got them into the championship status. And so there are some things we look at where we have to compare a team or a person to another person. And so in that context, we look at a perfect score. However, there could be another team that had a perfect score, and then you go to subjective evaluation. You see, there isn't a perfect methodology to evaluate perfectionism.
There is no perfectionism, there's alignment, because everybody has their own way. So perfect means this is the ultimate way, and that doesn't exist. Everybody has their own way and path, and it's unique. It's aligned to every person. So rather than seeking perfection, we want to seek alignment, and understand that God didn't create this perfect world. In fact, I would say God created failure on purpose.
Yeah.
One, for us to learn to fall in love with the process, for us to continuously want to improve and grow, which is exciting if you think about it, right? I mean, let's talk in very practical ways. You own a home. If that home was perfect, there's nothing to change within a few years, you'll be bored.
Yeah, no kidding.
How fun is it when you say, okay, what project can I do this year? What can I improve? What can I make better, prettier, right? So in fact, we're doing some renovations in our house, and I thought about this. What's the lesson to my children? How we are slowly improving our own home. We're teaching them that you don't have to wait until you find the perfect home.
Right.
You have the budget to buy the perfect home. You can actually improve with time and make it better. And I'm teaching them what it takes, a very important life lesson, right? It's not just for the house, it's for everything, for ourselves as well. So, you start in a job, okay, it's not the perfect position, just put your foot in and then grow from there. So I think that's why, God created failure on purpose. But there's another reason. And I think that God created the world not as a perfect world. So we exercise our free will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unconditional love.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also have often given this a bit of a thought. Why would a God and the God of your understanding, whatever that means to you, why
Yes.
would that God only give us 10% of our brain to use? Right? I mean, perfection would have been a whole 100%. But there's obviously a reason that we're at 10% because there is a process along the way for our growth. Perhaps there is wisdom in not giving us too much too fast, without giving us time to understand the repercussion, consequences, and opportunities from our behavior and actions.
Absolutely. I love that. And then it's also, again, it's so easy to love something when it's perfect. But if I love someone or something because it's perfect,
so funny.
Yeah, am I really loving that thing or that person? Or am I loving the perfection or what they represent as perfect, right?
Yeah.
The true choice and the free will is when you love someone despite their imperfections. And then you really have a choice. You're choosing to love them with their imperfections. It's like you realize that not only you have a choice of action, you have a choice of thought, because you can look at somebody that is very stubborn and say, do I look at this person as extremely stubborn, or do I look at this person as very determined and persistent?
Yeah.
I get to choose. So if people were perfect, or some people were perfect, everybody would love them. But are they loving the person, or are they loving the perfection of it?
Yeah. But also, here's what we're talking about. If we anchor ourselves to perfection or perfectionism, what we miss out on is the opportunity to change.
That's right.
If perfection is that thing that once you achieve it, there's nothing else left. Boring is what you said. But you see, it's going to be difficult. Even in science, the perfect solution is not done. Science is a never ending. Even if you develop something, even if you develop a vaccine for polio, there's still things to do. What is it about this, in God's creation of the world and what God needed to do? What do you think the motive was behind that? Okay, I'm not saying, yeah, I think there's a motive, right? I always think there's some kind of motive for us as humanity to achieve a level of growth that's part of our journey. It's not spelled out for us, but what do you think is underlining this? Why not just give us perfectionism?
I think that God, as we said, created us imperfect. So we grow and co-create with him. We want perfect because we think that God is perfect. And then we see that God, whatever that God is for you, of course, everybody with their own faith, or the universe, or vital force energy, we see that God as perfect. And then we think, we aim to be the same, perfect, to be worthy of his love and connection. But the question is, connection. Do we really need to be perfect to connect with God or any other person? Do we? Because connection is not about perfection. Connection is about love and the desire to know someone deeper, including if you believe in God or your faith in your God. So when I love someone, I want to know them more. It's my desire. When I say I love you, I have a desire to know you more and maybe create a life with you. If I love my friend, I say I love you. I have a desire to go through this life as friends, right? And get to know you deeper. So when we say I want to connect with God, well, all you need is just love. You don't need to be perfect. There is no auditions, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to audition to be connected to God. All you need is love and the desire to go deeper in that relationship that you have with your God. There are no auditions for that. And if we knew there are no auditions, then we wouldn't be so stressed about our performance and having to be perfect.
When we start to think about the performance factor of perfectionism, it is a thankless, never-ending journey to nowhere. And the reason I say that is, you know, and I know the journey to perfectionism is so elusive. It's this thing we make up in my mind, right? You make something up and you say, if I got here, that would be perfect, right? You write the language. If I get to here, that would be perfect. Then you get there and you're like, oh, no, wait a minute. Oh, it's not quite here. I need to now get to there, right? Because this is our nature, and our nature is not perfectionism. It's that divine evolutionary process to continue to grow, isn't it?
Absolutely. Look, here's what I believe. We receive gifts to impact this world, okay? We all come with gifts. I was having this conversation with my middle son yesterday. His gifts were very clear when he became 3. It was very obvious. I said, how would we know this is a gift you received? Because you had it at a higher dose than others. It was his artistic abilities. You could draw, not like a 3-year-old. No, I'm not saying other kids couldn't draw, but you had something that was above. So that was a gift that was given to you. Now, we don't need to be perfect to have permission to use our gifts, because our gifts and to use them to impact the world is not about perfection. They don't need to be perfect. It's just about evoking what is to impact the world. Do you need to be perfect to impact the world? Absolutely not. What do you need to do? You need to evoke a feeling using your gifts. So an artist will evoke the feeling of his art, whatever it makes people feel. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to evoke a feeling. A contractor will build a house and evoke a feeling of safety for someone, or harmony. A designer will evoke the feeling of beauty and so on. A baker will evoke the feeling of, I don't know, home when you eat his bread, or comfort. So it doesn't require perfection. It simply requires that we give ourselves permission, or we devote ourselves to discovering our gifts. If we don't remember, if we haven't uncovered them yet, some people, it's obvious for them, but not for everybody from the beginning, to discover our gifts. And once we do, to commit to use those gifts to serve and create goodness, not perfection, goodness. And to our best abilities, while continuously talking about progress, continuously improve ourselves and our craft. That's what it is.
That's the gift we were given. That's the miracle of what we were given.
That's the miracle of the creation.
Yes. And that's what's so important about what you're talking about today. Striving for something that we were never meant to achieve is very painful. And perfectionism is that.
It's also about you. It means that it's all about you.
It is. But you and I both know, even in even the most in-depth science, there's a margin of error. I don't care who you go to, what research facility, I don't care what drug you're creating, what herbal remedy, there is always a margin of error. Now, we don't read that fine print, but there's always a caveat that says within a plus or minus 1%, da, 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 da.
And there's always a side effect. So it's nothing is perfect.
That's right.
Right?
Yes. And the side effect of accepting failure as a thing, that could be devastating.
Absolutely. Nothing is perfect. Even with the best intentions. The things are good. You can have a medication that it's good, but it's not perfect. That's why it has side effects.
Mm-hmm.
And the invitation for our listeners is to look at failure, not as failure, but as progress, right? To know that you are somewhere along that path that you don't know how long it's going to take, but it doesn't really matter. If you fall in love with the journey, sometimes people don't want the journey to end.
Yeah.
Imagine you're flying in first class. You go, I don't need the plane to arrive to its destination. This is fun.
I know.
Right? So if you fall in love with the journey, you'll be less attached when you arrive to your destination, or when are you going to see results?
Yeah.
And the idea is to understand that you and all of us, we have permission to walk in this earth without being perfect.
Thank you.
And we deserve to be loved without being perfect. Just doing our best and growing and improving, that's enough.
That's the big game changer. Gabrielle, thank you so much. Please tell people how they can find out more about you, Gabriela, if you don't mind.
Let's connect. First of all, can we invite everybody to subscribe to this podcast where you are listening, YouTube, or if you are listening the audio, please subscribe. It helps. And share it with others. And if you want to connect with us, we are at coachingacademy.net.
And for those of you out there, please think about what Gabriela has said, because there are so many gold nuggets in the journey. And if you can let go for a minute of a definitive, concrete outcome that would describe perfectionism for you, try to substitute it with progress. Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Dr. Pat. Can I add one more tip?
Sure.
I said those words on Monday morning at the coaching class. I said, just a quick tip. If you feel insecure, jealous, like an imposter, or any other of unpleasant feeling about your craft, that's a sign that you're not taking enough action. When you're on the go, on the move, you won't compare yourself with others, and you won't care you're not perfect.
Love it. Gabriela, thank you so much. Everybody, we're going to take a short break. Remember this, as a sidebar to all of this, you're enough. We'll see you in a few minutes.
You have been listening to Life Engineering, processes that combine science, wisdom, and spirituality to create a life of alignment on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Join host Gabriela Embon and Dr. Pat every first and third Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific for bi-weekly wisdom nuggets on how to create your perfect synergy between your mind, body, and spirit in order to realize your true potential. For more information, visit Gabriela at coachingacademy.net.